Hey everyone, welcome to Great Lakes Church. My name is Carson, and I gotta tell you before we get into our weekly message that we're a community of people helping people find and follow Jesus. We're based out of Southeast Wisconsin. We have physical locations in Kenosha and Racine, but if you're listening to this or watching this, you've found our online presence. We share content on our YouTube and our podcast platforms wherever you listen, and we love that you're a part. If you want to know more about what's going on here at Great Lakes Church, you can find out more at greatlakeschurch.com or check out our central hub. But until then, everything you need is going to be in the description, so enjoy the message, and we'll catch you next time.
Hello. Guys, it is good to see you. Several weeks ago, we started a series that we're simply calling Foolproofing Your Life. Foolproofing Your Life. And it's a series in which we are looking at wisdom written by King Solomon in his book of Proverbs 3,000 years ago. Now, most of us are familiar with Proverbs, right? Because we have Proverbs in America, and really every nation has their own Proverbs. Proverbs are short phrases about how life generally works. In other words, if you do this, here is what you can expect. Not all the time, because these are not promises, these are not principles, they are proverbs. But most of the time, here's what you can expect. And in our culture, we have not only a lot of proverbs, but we have a lot of proverbs very specific to the topic of money. We say things like cash is king. Yeah, the best things in life are free. Money can't buy happiness, right? Or money isn't everything. Yeah. How about this one? Time is money. Yeah. The enthusiasm in this room that I'm speaking in is underwhelming right now. But I will bring the energy. So here's the deal. My favorite Wikipedia page of all time is about a guy who had some money. And it begins with these words. Ronald James Reed was an American philanthropist, investor, janitor, and gas station attendant. Now, why I love this page so much, you can just even tell by the words, it is a very eclectic group of words. And the Wikipedia page goes on to give us a pretty good overview of Ronald Reed's life. He was born in rural Vermont. He was the first person in his family to graduate high school, which is pretty impressive, knowing that he had to walk or hitchhike to high school every single day. But other than that, there's not much of anything impressive on his page. We know that he fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years. Right? In fact, we have a picture here of the gas station that he worked at. He swept floors in a JCPenney for 17 years. He bought a 2-bedroom house for $12,000 when he was just 38 years old. That's where he lived for the rest of his life. He was widowed at the age of 50 and never remarried. His hobby, which he really enjoyed, was chopping firewood. And then Ronald Reed died in 2014 at the age of 92. And that is when this former janitor living in rural Vermont made international headlines. Because even though almost 3 million Americans died in 2014, fewer than 1% of them had a net worth of over $8 million. Ronald Reed was one of them. So in his will, he leaves $2 million to his stepkids and more than $6 million to a local hospital and library. And everybody who knew Ronald Reed was totally shocked. They were baffled. They thought, man, he must have won the lottery. But there was no secret. He did not win the lottery. He did not inherit a bunch of money. He just saved what little he could over the course of his life, and he kept investing it in blue chip stocks. And for several decades, his money kept compounding, and eventually his portfolio was worth more than $8 million. That's how he turned from janitor into philanthropist. And it's a fascinating story, right? Because of how rare it is. 73% of Americans, when they die, they have some sort of outstanding debt, which shouldn't shock us because that's how we live, right? Right now, the average American has a debt balance of around $32,000, which does not include mortgage, all right? So that's car debt, college debt, and credit card debt. Now, this is fascinating to me. And I love that we're gonna kind of hit on this topic today because we live in a nation that prides ourselves on freedom, right? We're all about being free, and yet most of us are living in financial slavery. We're slaves to our car loans and our credit card payments. We're slaves to the stress and fear of not having enough margin. We're slaves to our job because even if we hate our job, we can't really quit it because we don't have enough put aside to look for a job. We're slaves to this pressure of trying to keep up with everyone else. And it is the reason why King Solomon of Israel writes that just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. When we overextend ourselves financially, the fact is we don't have a lot of freedom. We become servants to the bank. We become servants to the credit card company, to the business. We become servant to the employer. We become servant to the person we're indebted to. We become servants. And so the question I want to wrestle with today is, how do we get to a point in our finances that they're not a major stress in our life? What we're going to do is we're going to talk about foolproofing our finances, and we're going to talk about a path that leads to financial freedom. Now, throughout this series, we've been talking about two different types of people, wise people and foolish people. And we say that foolish people are people who live for the moment, right? They're people who think about the present. They're not thinking about the consequences of their decisions. They're not thinking about what's going to happen long term. They're just thinking about today. And so when it comes to finances, they're thinking about, what can I buy today? What will bring me pleasure today? What can I enjoy today? What can entertain me today? That's what they're obsessed with. Wise people are different. Wise people make decisions today that that has tomorrow in mind, right? They think about the future. So they have an idea financially of where they want to be in the future, and they're doing their best to make decisions that move them down a path that brings them in that direction. And so let's talk about financial freedom. In order to do that, we have to understand a little bit of what financial freedom looks like, and there's probably 500 definitions I could give you, but this is the simplest. Financial freedom is having margin in our finances. All right, so this isn't about having $8 million in blue chip stocks. And this isn't about having boats and cars and multiple houses. Financial margin is simply having breathing room, which is really good news for all of us, because it's pretty much like, doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't even matter where you're currently at in your financial situation, doesn't matter what your income is. It's possible for every one of us to have financial freedom in our life. Because financial freedom is less about acquiring money and more about holding on to money. It's less about what I have in my garage and more about what I have in the bank. And the reason we all know this is true is because 70% of lottery winners end up broke after just a few years. Right? So you can have a lot of money, but if you don't have wisdom, it won't last very long. So wise people pursue financial freedom. Wise people have a picture of financial freedom. They have a picture of living a life with some margin, and they move in that direction. All right? That's what financial freedom is. It's living with margin. If I choose to have margin in my finances and I find a way to do that, here's what happens. I have way more freedom to do what I want. I have freedom to do with what I want to with my time. Right? I have freedom with my energy and my focus. I have freedom, if I want, to quit my job and look for another job. I have freedom of choice. I have multiple types of cars that I can buy. I can have multiple types of homes that I can look at. If I want to move, I have the freedom to move. That's what financial freedom does. And it's why King Solomon writes that the earnings of the godly enhance their lives. Guys, we all want our lives to be better. Right? We all want to have freedom in our lives and experience some margin. So the question is, why is it so difficult to live with margin? Why is it so difficult to get to a point in our life where we live on less than we make? Well, the quick answer is because we all have different personalities, different backgrounds, and different upbringings that have shaped who we are and how we approach money. So let me just give you some examples of the different approaches to money, right? Some people, they hoard money. Right? These are usually people who grew up with nothing. So out of their fear and insecurity, they're trying to hoard. Or maybe they've had a bad experience. People who grew up in the Great Depression, right? A lot of people who grew up in the Great Depression hoarded money. They hid it under mattresses and hid it in different parts of their houses. And the reason why was because they had a bad experience with the bank. So they hoard money, right? Other people, they hate money. They see it as a necessary evil. And the reason why is they've watched money destroy their family. They've watched money tear apart relationships, greed, and the distrust, and all of the things attached to that, right? So they're kind of disgusted towards money. Other people, they like to spend money. They look at their life and they say, my life is stressful, so I deserve to go out to eat again tonight, and I deserve to go to the spa again this weekend, and I deserve to go on vacation, and I deserve to do a shopping spree on Amazon, right? Other people, they avoid money. And it's just the fact that they don't like to think about it, right? They don't want to think about a budget. They don't want to do the math, carry the one. It's just too much. It's like, okay, I'm hoping I'm good. I've never balanced a checkbook in my life. I hope I am doing okay, right? Then there is the show off, right? The show off is the person who buys things to kind of increase their social status. And so they not only buy things with name brands, nothing wrong with that, but they want you to know it's name brand. If you didn't know, they'll make sure you see the tag. Hey, look at this tag, man. This is what I bought. It's all about social status, right? Other people, they spend a lot of time worrying about money. They're worst case scenario people. And so they're always looking at the stock market, and they're always looking at what crypto's doing today and all this stuff, and they're just worried all the time. Other people love to give money. And like the moment they get money, it's kind of out of their hands. They just like to bless, and they just see money as an opportunity to help other people. Right? I actually follow some people on TikTok who that is their whole shtick. They get money from some of their viewers, and they ask them to give to an account, and then they go out and they just give money away, right? Other people, they use money to manipulate. They use it to buy influence over other people and to control other people. And this is not an exhaustive list, right? There's lots of things that we could put onto this list, but at the end of the day, our personalities, our backgrounds, our upbringing impacts how we approach money. And it's the reason why couples often fight about finances, because you have two different individuals with two different backgrounds, two different ways of thinking, who come into a marriage. And in every area, but money is always a big area, right? They try to blend together, and there's tension and there's conflict. Well, of course there's gonna be. We're different individuals. So how do we get to a point where finances are not a major stress point in our life? How do we create margin in our finances? How do we break free from the unhealthy parts of our personality and upbringing and thinking and how we approach money? Well, it starts with understanding that money is a powerful tool, right? And that's neutral. There's nothing inherently wrong or right about money. It is a tool. It can be used for the good or bad, right? So I can take a hammer, I can pound a nail into drywall, and I can build something, or I can take that hammer, walk into someone's office, and completely destroy their computer. It's neutral, but it is a tool. It's like a knife, right? You give a knife to a surgeon, and they can save someone's life. You hand that knife to a serial killer, good night to all of us, right? It is a powerful tool. It shapes how we see things. So when I have an abundance of money, there are certain jobs that are definitely beneath me. Like, I would rather die than do that job. There's no way I will ever do that. However, when I have no money and I'm trying to put food on the table, it's like, I think I'm qualified to do that. Give me a job application, right? It shapes how we see things. A few years ago, I actually read a study in which hundreds of women were asked to rate the attractiveness of men based only on their picture. So they're shown a picture, they had to rate them from 1 to 10. So they did. Then another group of women were given the exact same pictures to rate. 2 details were added: occupation and salary. On average, the guys who are doctors, engineers, and lawyers were rated 2 points higher than they were in the previous study, even though it was the exact same picture being used. Money is a powerful tool, right? It has the power to shape how we see things. It has the power to deceive us. People fall into scams. People fall into things all the time. They're drawn in because of money. It has the power to deceive. And one of the stories Jesus told, he actually warned against what he called the deceitfulness of riches, the deceitfulness of wealth. Money tricks us into believing that our self-worth is somehow connected to our net worth. It tricks us into believing that if we just had more money, we would be happier. We would be more satisfied. And yet study after study after study shows us that's not true. Lottery winners show us that's not true. But it deceives us. How do I know? Because we all still want to win the lottery, right? I'm going to be the exception. It's a powerful tool. It can shield us from all kinds of attacks. It can be used in a good way, right? King Solomon writes that the wealth of the rich is their fortress. Now, Solomon was a king. And many of the kings living thousands of years ago lived in cities or homes or palaces that were fortified. And so they wanted to ensure that they were protected from their enemies. And so what Solomon is saying is that, in a sense, having financial freedom, having a savings, not living paycheck to paycheck, is like having a fortress. The financial enemies that try to attack every single one of us are not going to be able to bring us down. They won't destroy us. Enemies like taxes and inflation and emergencies and drops in the stock market, they're not going to have the final word because we're fortified. It is a powerful, powerful tool. It can be a blessing in our life, or it can be a burden in our life. And if we want it to be a blessing, we need to come up with a plan. Now, I know for some of you, this is your love language. So, financial planning, right? I asked Dave Ramsey into my heart years ago. I can't wait to hear what you're about to say, right? So some of you, this is just very natural. Others of you, the idea of having a financial plan is so far removed. It's just like you start to get a little tick. It's like, what is going on? I don't want to talk about financial plan. I get it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually give all of us a very simple financial plan to follow. It is not thorough. And I would advise you, if you struggle financially, if you don't know where you're headed, you're kind of one of these people who don't think a lot about money, or you're a little bit nervous about it, talk to a professional about it. Talk to someone who has been there, even if it costs you some money. Guys, 2 years ago, I started getting a little worried about, am I going to, be able to retire someday? As much as I love you, I don't want to work till I'm 95, okay? And so I sent all of my finances in to a financial planner, and I said, help. I want to know if I'm doing okay. And they responded a couple days later, and they said, Dave, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The bad news is that you are behind. The good news is you're not super far behind, and if you do what I'm going to advise you to do, you can get caught up. So I said, let's do it. And for the last couple of years, I've been playing catch up, and I'm going to keep playing catch up. So here's the deal. We all need a plan. The problem is, if we have a plan, there's going to be an enemy to attack the plan. And the biggest enemy is not going to be inflation, and it's not going to be gas prices, and not going to be the cost of eggs or the cost of meat. The biggest enemy to whatever plan we have is a little thing called instant gratification. Right? The moment we get that plan, it's like, ooh, I want to get that. Oh, I didn't know that was going to be on sale. Oh, Kohl's is having another sale. This is amazing, right? And guys, it's going to be something we have to fight against. So here we go. I'm going to give you a plan that leads to financial freedom. If you've been around Great Lakes Church for any length of time, you've seen this plan on many, many occasions. Here we go. Give, save, live on the rest. That's done. That's it. Give, save, live on the rest. Financial freedom starts by learning how to give. Now, before you tune me out, I want you to hear me out, right? I have not talked about giving at Great Lakes Church for more than a year, probably 2 years. I mean, it's been a long time. I actually started feeling recently, I'm pretty irresponsible by not teaching our church about giving because of what it does in our heart. Right? Jesus talked a lot about money. Here's the deal. Jesus never took up an offering. Now, we're not Jesus, so we'll keep taking up offerings, right? But here's the deal. Jesus, he talked a lot about money because he knows the power it can have in our life. All of us, I'm convinced, regardless of where you're at in your faith journey, to some extent want God involved in our finances, right? We want God to bless us. We want God to provide for us. We want God to open up opportunities for us to make more money. Like, that's how most of us think. And again, the reason I say, regardless of where you're at in your faith, it's because if any of us lose our job, one of the first things we do is ask people around us, hey, can you pray for me? Right? Because I need to find another job. Like, we want God to be included in our finances. And so giving is a way to include God on the front end of our finances. And this is why Solomon writes, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Some translations say your first fruits, right? Bring the first parts to God. And the idea is that whenever we get paid, the very first thing we do is we give some of it back to God. And I say back to God because ultimately everything comes from God, right? Everything we have is a result of God's blessing in our life. And so we say, God, I'm going to return to you some of what you've trusted me with. It is a priority. So recently, my daughter, Caitlin, called me up. She was panicked. She says, I don't know where my gas cap is. And she said, can you order me a gas cap for my car? So I looked on Amazon, found the right fit, and ordered her a gas cap. Well, it came in this week. And so my daughter, Caitlin, lives in Milwaukee. She came down to pick it up. And this week, I got a call from her as I was already at work, and she's panicked, and she says, it doesn't fit. I'm trying to get this thing on, and it doesn't fit. And I said, okay, it's possible that we got the wrong cap. It said it fit, but okay, here's the deal. I live less than 5 minutes from the Kenosha campus. And so I was working at Kenosha campus, and I said, here's the deal. I'm at Kenosha campus right now. Just swing on by. Oh, Dad, I ain't got time. Dad, I ain't got time. I've got too many things going on. I said, listen, you have to swing by. It's going to take me 2 minutes. It's not going to be long, but then you can give me the cap and I can return it if it doesn't work. Okay. But first I need to go to Starbucks. I said, wait a minute. You're so busy. You got so much going on. But first, you need to go to Starbucks, right? This is all about priority. Everything in life, our time, our energy, everything is about priority. And when it comes to a financial plan, when it comes to moving towards financial freedom, giving's right at the top. Now, I know that this is challenging for some people because of the emotions attached to money, right? Fear, insecurity, joy, stress, cynicism, jealousy, pride, excitement, greed. And what giving does is it breaks the emotional power that money has on us. It breaks this obsession that we have of thinking we always got to accumulate more and more and more and more. King Solomon puts it this way. He says, some people are always greedy for more, but the godly love to give. If I can't learn to give, I'm never going to truly be free. I can have margin, but I'm going to be enslaved to fear or anxiety or stress or self-centeredness or greed. So Solomon says the godly love to give. But giving is a challenge because it is in direct conflict with the concept of self-preservation, right? There's a point in which we're like, well, being generous is is in direct opposition to my well-being, right? It's kind of a threat to where I want to go in life. Most people I know want to be generous, they're just afraid. And I'm thinking, man, it doesn't make sense. It's being irresponsible. And so financial freedom requires us to develop an attitude and a way of thinking that is louder than the soundtrack of what ifs in our life. What if the interest rates change? What if inflation picks up? What if I lose my job? What if there's an emergency? What if? What if, right? And so I want you to hear this. This is not about being irresponsible. The challenge I have to all of us is that we learn to live open-handed. And I realize it's like riding a bike for the first time, right? You get on a bike for the first time and you're nervous and you're wobbling all over the place and you're scared that you're gonna fall, right? You got your training wheels, but eventually over time you build more and more confidence. Learning to give is a very scary experience at first, but over time we grow in our confidence and in our ability. But I will say this, we will never become truly generous if we do not at some level change our lifestyle. Right, so when someone says, I can't give, I say, I believe you. I can't give and maintain my current lifestyle. At some point, we have to take a step back and say, hey, I'm gonna make this a priority, so I'm gonna change some things. Now, if you're not a follower of Jesus, I promise you, you do not have to be cynical about what we're talking about, because I'm not asking you to feel the pressure of giving to a church. I still want you to feel pressure to give somewhere. And the reason why is because I don't want money to control your life. I don't want money to, guys, we live in one of the wealthiest countries in the history of the world. And so if you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, I just encourage you, or you say, hey, I am, but I'm still cynical of giving to the church, then give to a nonprofit. Give to an organization in the community that is doing great work. Choose to be a blessing to other people. If we can't learn to do this, guess what happens? We're not really free. Because again, we walk around with cynicism, we walk around with holding on to things, and it's got a grip on our heart. Now, if you are a follower of Jesus, like I am, our giving does primarily happen through the local church. And I say that because we see a pattern of giving all throughout the scriptures. And the reason for that is because the local church is intended to be the hands and feet of Jesus in this world. And people say, well, I have been part of a church that never did anything in the community. They never did anything in the world. I always ask, why are you going there? Because that's the purpose of the church, right? It's not just to have a bunch of nice programs and singing and services. Man, we are supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus in the world. And that's why Great Lake Church, every single week, we're doing our best to show videos, and we're doing our best you can swing by the Next Steps table at any point, and there's a booklet of different things that happen and take place to let you know we're doing our best to care and love and serve people here, near, and far, right? The local church, we have a mandate of caring for the poor, advocating for the overlooked, watching out for those who are vulnerable, speaking up for those who don't have a voice. And so earlier in this service, we talked about our partnership with Compassion International and building a church for a village in Nicaragua that doesn't have one. Later this year, we are gonna have the opportunity to sponsor the children in that village. Okay, so all the children, hundreds and hundreds of children in that village, we're gonna have the opportunity to sponsor them. And my hope, my prayer is that Great Lakes Church ends up sponsoring every single child in that village, because I know we have the ability to do it. Well, that just seems like, listen, King Solomon says this, if you help the poor, you are lending to the Lord and he will repay you. Right? This is not about like, oh, it's a loss. No, it's an investment. I'm convinced the reason our church has been able to thrive financially As little as we talk about money, we don't even pass an offering bucket at Great Lakes Church. I'm telling you, I have friends that say, we don't know how you do it. You don't pass an offering bucket. You guys rarely talk about money. I'm telling you, I am convinced because God has honored this. If you help the poor, you're lending to the Lord and he will repay you. Now, I know I seem a little overly passionate about it, and I promise you it's not because I'm a pastor. I will acknowledge this is easy for me to do. I don't ever remember it being a struggle. That's because of the home I grew up in. Right, so I grew up back in the 1980s. My parents had virtually no money. My dad had just started to follow Jesus. He was in his early to mid 20s. He had young kids. He's working at a factory, American Brass. Apparently he also worked for the mafia at the same time, right? But he had this growing family and lots of financial obligations. And my dad, when he became a follower of Jesus, decided to walk the path of financial freedom by learning this principle of give, save, live, and the rest. And my parents made a decision to actually give away 10% of their income, which is a practice done by ancient Jews that we see in the scripture. And my mom will admit, she didn't even think it was possible. And they argued about it, but my dad said, hey, listen, we're gonna trust God to provide, and if he doesn't provide, we're gonna stop giving. It's as simple as that. Now, I don't recommend that approach to the scripture, but whatever, right? That was his approach. And I gotta tell you, for all of my life, my parents have been two of the most generous people I know. They've just lived open-handed. I've said this before, that I've actually challenged my dad. I said, Dad, I'm afraid I'm never gonna inherit anything. You're just giving it all away. And he says, that's the plan. That's the goal. And they don't give out of guilt. They don't give out of shame or obligation. They give because they've discovered the joy of giving. Solomon writes this, he says, the generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. Now here's the problem with the joy of giving. If you've never really experienced it, it's almost impossible to understand. Right? It's like talking to someone who's really excited about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and the blockchain, and you're like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. And they're excited, no, if you understood how this works and how this can, and you're like, I don't understand it. Right? It's impossible to express the joy of giving or explain it if someone hasn't experienced it. Now again, I grew up in a home where it was modeled for me. And so I've done this, I've been living open-handed ever since I started mowing lawns at 12 years old. Renee and I, we've done it our entire life. We've always lived by this principle. We give, save, live, and the rest. And for me, again, this is how I grew up. I gave away 10% ever since I was 12 years old. And after I was married, there have been seasons where we've given 20% and sometimes even 30%. And the only reason I share that is I want you to know I am smoking what I am selling. Renee and I believe this so much that we did our best to pass it on to our kids. We just teach them every time they get paid, we have 3 envelopes, give, save, live, and the rest. And we try to instill this in them. My 17-year-old son, Jaden, gives 10% of everything he earns. And here's the deal. I don't make him do that. It's his choice, but we tried to teach it. We have several children and teenagers in our church who I know give generously throughout the year. Because our accounting team, they'll tell me, they say, hey, I don't know if you know this, but we have teenagers in our church who every week are giving, for them, significant sums of money. But here's the deal. The reason I taught my kids that principle wasn't because the church needed their money. I could have taken their money, right? It's because I've lived long enough to know that if we do not learn how to control our money, eventually our money will control us. Rahat Gupta, born in Calcutta, India, orphaned as a teenager, had extreme challenges, and yet he ended up becoming one of the most successful businessmen on the planet. Sat on the board of directors for Goldman Sachs and Procter & Gamble and American Airlines. He advised nonprofits like Gates Foundations and big foundations like that. And then he got arrested for insider trading and ended up spending a couple years in prison. He lost his career and his reputation. Went from being worth almost $100 million to losing it. Guys, he had money, but he wasn't financially free. Because instead of controlling his money was controlling him. Financial freedom is just about margin. But it's more than that. Financial freedom is independence from this belief that life equals stuff, that my net worth and my self-worth are somehow connected. It's independence from the belief that the more I have, the happier I'm gonna be. It's being independent from the fears associated with money. And when we develop the habit of give, save, live, and the rest, we are choosing ultimately to be dependent on God. We're saying, my life is just more than this, and I trust you. I return to you a portion of what you've trusted me with. And I'm just gonna tell you, it's gonna be a lifelong battle, right? Money is always going to be in competition for my heart and your heart and the hearts of our children. And this is why Jesus taught no one can serve two masters. He says, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. That's an odd comparison. He doesn't say you cannot serve both God and friends or God and spouse or God and your job. He says, you cannot serve both God and money. And it's an interesting comparison because you know the greatness of something by what you compare it to, right? For example, if we're going to talk about basketball, right? Who is the greatest basketball player of all time? Michael Jordan or LeBron, right? Or Kobe, or right? We compare by greatness. So if we're going to talk about female singers, we say, who is the greatest female singer of all time? Mariah Carey or Whitney Houston? All right, there we go, right? How come nobody said Michael Jordan or Allen Iverson? Michael Jordan or Larry Bird? Larry Bird was great. Allen Iverson, great. But we know they're not at that level, right? How come you didn't say Mariah Carey and J-Lo, right? J-Lo's a great dancer, but she's not the same league of singing as Mariah. There is a lot of things that compare for our heart, but Jesus says right at the top, if you're going to go head to head with this stuff, it's going to be between God and money. And we learn to break the power that money can have on our life by learning to give. And it's very simple. It goes from nothing to something. I'm never giving to a church. Guess what? $1. Woo, I did it. I did it. I'm working towards freedom. Well, that's kind of the starting point. We go from nothing to something. But here we go. I'm going to give you just a little steps toward generosity. We say priority, percentage, progressive. Once we decide we're going to make giving a priority in our life. Now, here's the deal. For me and my wife, minimum 10%. Our staff, minimum 10%. I invite you to work towards it. I realize that'd be a very scary place to start, but we see that in the Jewish scriptures as a practice for them. We live in, again, the wealthiest country, or one of the wealthiest countries in the history of the world. So I'm like, why not use that as a starting point? But priority giving, right? Maybe it's saying, okay, I'm going to be goofy here because I don't want anybody to think I'm manipulating, right? It's $1 every single week. I'm going to do it, but you do it every time you get paid. It's just a priority. Then after you develop that habit, you start to move toward a percentage. 3%, 4%, 6%, whatever that percentage is. And the reason a percentage is because then as God blesses you with more income, man, your giving naturally goes up because it's attached to a percentage, right? And then we say progressive, right? That there's going to be season in life you just feel prompted like, man, in this season, I need to stretch myself more than ever for whatever reason. I just feel God asking me to do this. And we grow in this area. And people who have done this, every single person I know, I'm sure there's exceptions. Every person who's done this will tell you there's joy in it. There's freedom in it. And I always like to remind you, we do not give so that God will bless us. We give because we are blessed, right? This is not about make Jesus your choice. You'll drive a Rolls Royce, right? We give because we are blessed. This is an overflow of what God has done in our life. So I invite you to do this. I invite you to do this. Historically, followers of Jesus have always led the way in generosity and sacrificial giving. And if you have any cynicism inside of you, if you have any little thing in your heart, pastor's talking about this, listen. Major study recently came out, done by the, trying to think of the name of the organization off the top of my head. I'll think about it in a second. Here we go. Here's the finding. Christian philanthropy accounted for 70% of all American philanthropy in 2022. Don't miss that. Right? Major organization. I'm sorry I didn't write it down. Christian philanthropy accounted for 70% of all American philanthropy in 2022. Now I want you to think about that. Of all the money given away by foundations and businesses and individuals, 70% this last year in 2022 was given away by followers of Jesus to and through the church. It accounts for more than $300 billion. What's even more crazy is the same study said Christians outgave the US government in addressing global poverty in 2022. So guard your heart against cynicism. Just join in on the greatest revolution of generosity this world's ever seen. So after we give, what do? We save. The plan that leads to financial freedom is give, save, live on the rest. Even if it's $1, just save something. Try to invest in the future. Right? And ideally, this would be 10% or more, but we set aside money so we can live with margin and we're prepared for a rainy day. Right? When we experience financial freedom from the pressures that come, it means there's a pressure that's released that comes when a financial emergency comes our way. So here's what King Solomon writes next. He says, wealth from get-rich-quick scheme they quickly disappear. He said, wealth from hard work grows over time. After we give, we save, and now we live on the rest. That's the path that leads to financial freedom. Give, save, live on the rest. We pay our bills now. We get to go out to eat. We get to have a lot of fun. That's the plan. It's the path wise people take. So, started out by telling you about Ronald Reed, died, had $8 million to give away. A few months after Ronald Reed died, another man named Richard, I said Ronald Reed, I think Richard was the name, Richard Reed, died. Richard was in the news, Richard Fascone. And there's everything that the other guy was not, right? That Ronald Reed was not. No, I have these names right, I'm sorry. But a Harvard-educated, Merrill Lynch executive with an MBA, retired in his 40s, was a philanthropist. And he was known for being business savvy and having leadership skills, sound judgment, and personal integrity. People love this guy. But in the mid-2000s, things started falling apart, and he borrowed heavily to expand his 18,000 square foot home, had 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, 7 garages. It cost more than $90,000 a month to maintain. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, it destroyed him. He filed for bankruptcy. His Palm Beach home was foreclosed on, and then his Greenwich, Connecticut home was sent to auction and sold at 75% less than it was appraised at. Now, I'm not mocking him. I understand this stuff happens. We have plenty of people at Great Lakes who've had to foreclose. They've gone through loss. Listen, I'm sure he's a great guy. I want you to hear this. Our income doesn't play as big of a role in our financial freedom as we tell ourselves. If we want to be financially free, we have to develop a lifestyle that enables us to give, save, and then live on the rest. And giving will always result in joy, saving will always result in peace, and living on the rest will always result in freedom because we're not spending what we do not have. So I invite you into this world and experience what it offers. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for blessing us. We thank you that we get to live in the United States of America at one of the greatest times in the history of the world. May our eyes continually be open to how blessed we really are. Give us the wisdom to be able to foresee how we're able to give and save and then live on the rest, and then give us the courage to move in that direction. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for joining us here at Great Lakes Church. Again, my name is Carson, and I'm so glad that you chose to share some time with us this week. We hope something in this talk was meaningful to you, encouraging to you, and maybe even something worth writing down that you can go share with a friend. If you'd like to get involved, maybe join us at one of our physical locations in Southeast Wisconsin, or just be a part of our many other goings-on our social platforms or events in the area. Check out greatlakeschurch.com.